So he is able to throw his hands in the air. You see, sometimes in our faith, when we need to stand firm in that faith, sometimes it's because we have to let someone go. We work really hard at getting one of our friends saved. I hate to tell you, it's not us that saves people. It's God, and God alone. They will see Jesus through us, and that can be a catalyst to launch them into curiosity about God and help them to find God, but it is not us that saves them. All we have to do is stand firm in our faith through all the persecution, through any time you might get made fun of, through anything that you're going through. Doesn't matter. Illness doesn't matter. Anything, you stand firm in your faith because we're then not responsible for their blood. You see, if you're not standing firm in your faith and you're willing to flounder, then you are responsible. Because he gave it to you, and he gave you opportunity to give it to someone else, and now you didn't. Now, does that mean that every time you get the opportunity, you're sitting at a coffee shop and you meet somebody for the first time, and so you sit down with them and you're like, yeah, my name's so-and-so, and do you know Jesus? No, you're an idiot if you do that, actually. That doesn't work. That you didn't miss an opportunity to share your faith because you didn't jump out and say to somebody, do you know Jesus? Go stand on the corner with a bullhorn screaming repent and see how well you do. It might have worked years ago. I don't know. But it sure doesn't work now because people need more. They need a deeper knowledge of God. They need to ask questions. And the way that you do this is through your relationships with individuals. Hence the flaw that we have in our Christian culture today of stay away. So, if you're staying away, you're liable for their blood. If you're standing firm and you're giving the gospel, you can throw your hands in the air and say, you guys made your own decision. I gave it to you. Standing firm in your faith. You got to know what you believe, and when you know what you believe, you stand firm in that. When somebody says, why are you a Christian? You need to be able to answer that question. And then stand firm in it. Which means you need to really believe it. Because when crap happens, that's when we start to break down the wall of who is really in the faith and who is not. I had somebody tell me one time, they were all mad because there was an issue that happened in their church, and a bunch of people left their specific church, and they were really upset about it because it was just, people hurt people. Anybody ever heard of that happening in church? And people hurt people, and so people left the church. And people that hadn't left the church were really mad at the leadership of the church because they're like, we can't believe that this happened, and now these people, they've walked away from God because of what happened to them at the church. And my answer to them would be, then they were awful weak in their faith because they were putting all their faith in the church, which is full of sinners and full of hurt because we all sin. Let me tell you a little secret about church. I don't care if you find the greatest church in the world, it just might hurt you. They might do something you don't like. The preacher might say something you don't like. We might make a decision that you don't like. We might not care for you the way that you want to be cared for. We might tick you off. See, I didn't swear. That's amazing. We might tick you off and you might leave the church. But if you walk away from your faith because we ticked you off, you're walking away from Jesus because the church hurt you? Really? That's pretty weak faith. You might get hurt by the church, the people in the church, but that doesn't reflect whether you serve Jesus. That's a bad, bad interpretation of the nature of God. You really just left the club, and you're upset and hurt because they didn't want you anymore. And so you look for a new club, and then you get hurt by that club, and then eventually you just walk away from Jesus because you're mad at the club. When the reality is you're just mad at a bunch of sinners, and Jesus is trying to clean up those sinners. So what you need to do is pray for the sinners and keep serving Jesus, standing firm in your faith. Very simple concept. I don't understand why we make it so difficult. You need to watch for false teachers while you're standing firm in your faith. Ephesians 4. I love this passage. Ephesians 4 says that we have to stand firm in our faith so that we may no longer be children, tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness in deceitful schemes. You see, the New Testament is about maturity. It's about no longer being children. See, we tell children step by step what to do. We don't tell adults step by step what to do because they're supposed to already know, right? It's like if you've been doing the same job for 30 years and you have to go ask your boss, and how do I turn on the machine that I've been turning on for 30 years? But that's how we act in our faith. And how do I pray to Jesus again? And how long you been saved? 35 years? Wow. That's being like a child. And Paul says that it's no longer like being like a child. He says, so that we may no longer be children, tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about with every wind of doctrine. You know those people that are like, I believe this doctrine. Now, no, I don't. Now I believe this one. No. Figure out what it is you believe and stand firm in it. This is the whole key to our whole relational aspect with Jesus Christ. Our knowledge of the nature of God. Being watchful, standing firm in the faith, and acting like men. All the ladies are like, really? Because we got a lot of putsy men out there today. We got a lot of little boys in men's bodies that act like children and can't take their biblical responsibilities serious. They can't lead in their spirituality. They can't step up to the plate and be a biblical man. Now, the Greek word that is actually used here in this text is only used specifically in the New Testament in this specific text. It's used nowhere else. But it's used over 20 times in the Greek Septuagint in the Old Testament. That's the Greek interpretation of the Old Testament, the Septuagint. And it's used 20 plus times in there, and every time what it actually represents is somebody being encouraged to be courageous. So some of your interpretations will say, instead of act like a man, it'll just say be courageous. I use a literal translation, a verse-by-verse translation, the English Standard Version, and the reason it interprets it as act like a man is because men were known to be the courageous ones in Bible time. They were the ones that stepped up to the plate and dealt with the stuff, that stepped up to the plate and spiritually guided their families, that stepped up to the plate and were a man. Not a girly man, but a man. I don't care what you do for a living. That is not what makes you a man. A man is courageous. Now, this applies to the women too. We need to be courageous in our faith. We need to step up and have some courage in the things we do. Do you see the trend that Paul is laying us through? He's basically telling us the same thing, point by point by point. Be watchful. Stand firm in your faith. Step it up, boys, and be a man. Have some courage. Then he says, be strong. Have a willingness to battle your way through things.